You ever get that travel bug? That urge, just to pack a bag and get out there, see the world?
Oh, absolutely. It's a feeling that's pretty hard to beat, isn't it?
It really is. But then there's always that one thing, visas.
Ah, yes. Visas, they can definitely put a damper on those travel plans.
You put it mildly, but what if there's like a way to make the whole visa thing easier? Less of a headache.
Well, there just might be.
Yeah.
It's all about electronic visas, or e-visas, as they're called.
E-visas. Okay, I've heard the term, but honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on what they actually are.
Basically, they're like the digital versions of the old paper visas. They use databases and biometrics to speed up the whole process.
So instead of stacks of paperwork, it's all online.
Exactly. And it makes things way more secure. Plus, it's easier for travelers and governments. Everybody wins.
Okay, that makes sense. So where does a company like Aid Air fit into this whole visa world?
Well, they're really at the forefront of this whole thing, and they have this philosophy, live borderless, which is pretty cool.
Live borderless. I like that. It has a nice ring to it.
Yeah, and for them, it's more than just a slogan. It's about really trying to eliminate all the stress that visas usually bring.
Because let's be honest, even if you've dotted all your I's and crossed your T's, there's always that little nagging worry, right? Like, what if something goes wrong?
Exactly. And that's where Adair's approach is kind of unique. They're really big on using human expertise in their process.
So in a world that's like increasingly obsessed with AI and automation, they're bringing back the human touch.
You got it.
Yeah.
They're all about combining technology with actual human expertise.
Now that's intriguing. Tell me more about how that works.
Well, think about the traditional visa application process. Pages and pages of forms, right? Confusing questions, jargon you've never even seen before.
Don't even get me started. It's like trying to decipher a foreign language sometimes.
It really can be.
Yeah.
And with 8Air, you have actual people who understand all that, reviewing your application.
Okay, so it's like having a guide, someone who actually speaks the language, to help you navigate the whole visa maze.
Exactly. They can spot potential problems, clear up confusion, and make sure everything meets the specific requirements of where you're going.
But that sounds reassuring, especially if you're new to the whole international travel scene. It's almost like having a, what do they call it, a concierge,
Yeah.
but for visas. Okay, that makes me feel better already. But while we're on the topic of making things less stressful, there's another thing that always makes me nervous in the digital world: data privacy.
Right. I get it. It's a valid concern for sure.
You're handing over a lot of personal information when you apply for a visa.
And you want to know it's in good hands. Well, 8Air seems to be pretty serious about that whole aspect, actually.
So how do they handle data privacy?
They've really built their platform around privacy. They only ask for the essentials, nothing more. And they have really strong security measures in place.
That's reassuring to hear. So they're not using my travel dreams for some marketing ploy,
Nope, they keep your information confidential.
which is definitely a good thing.
It definitely is. But going back to the human element for a sec, are there any, downsides to that? To having actual people involved?
That's a good question. One thing that comes to mind is processing time.
Because people aren't as fast as computers. Well, yeah. A fully automated system could theoretically be faster, especially when things get busy.
Right, like during peak travel season, everyone's rushing to get their visas.
Exactly. But 8Air seems to have found a good balance. They've streamlined their processes, and their team is trained to work quickly and efficiently.
So it's not like you're waiting months for a response.
No, not at all. And for most people, that peace of mind, knowing that an actual human is carefully reviewing your application, it's worth a little extra time.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. But let's talk big picture for a second. How do you see this whole visa trend, especially with Adair's approach, changing the future of travel?
Ah, now you're asking the really interesting questions. I think e-visas and companies like 8Air have the potential to completely change how we think about borders.
Okay, now I really want to hear more.
Think about it. E-visas could make travel accessible to way more people. The old way of doing things with all the paperwork and embassy visits, it's a huge barrier for a lot of people.
Especially in parts of the world where traveling to an embassy is a whole journey in itself.
Absolutely. But e-visas, they can level the playing field, make things fairer for everyone.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
It's not just about convenience, it's about making travel more inclusive.
Right. And it's not just about individuals either. This shift to digital can be massive for global business and tourism too. More collaboration, more innovation, more cultural exchange.
Right, like the more we connect with other cultures, the more we understand each other.
Exactly. And that's why I think 8Air's focus on human expertise is so important. They get that technology isn't the whole story. You need that human touch, empathy, and problem solving.
Because at the end of the day, travel is a human experience.
100%. It's about connecting with other people, experiencing new cultures.
Okay, so we've talked about the good stuff, but what about the bumps in the road? Are there any challenges that Avisas and companies like 8Air might face?
Well, one of the biggest ones is security, making sure these e-visa systems are really safe from hackers and fraud.
Especially with all that sensitive data involved?
Exactly. And it's not just about tech security either. We have to make sure these systems are easy to use for everyone, no matter how tech savvy they are.
We don't want to create a world where only people who are good with computers can travel easily.
Right, that would defeat the whole purpose.
Mm.
Accessibility is key. And on top of all that, there are ethical considerations too.
Ethical considerations, like
Yeah.
what?
Well, if we're not careful, these systems could be used in ways that are discriminatory. For example, if they rely on algorithms that have built-in biases.
Like if the data going into those algorithms is flawed, the results will be flawed too.
Precisely. That's why transparency is so important. We need to be able to see how these systems are making decisions and make sure they're fair.
So it's not just about building the technology, it's about making sure it's used responsibly.
Exactly. And that's where, again, that human element comes in. We need people who are thinking critically about these ethical issues and making sure the technology is being used for good.
Yeah, exactly like that. If the data is biased, the decisions will be biased too. And that could make it harder for certain groups of people to travel.
Which would be a huge step backwards. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen? Well, for starters, we need to be having these conversations. Talking about these ethical concerns is so important. And then we need to make sure there's transparency in how these systems are designed and used.
So we can make sure everyone has an equal opportunity to, experience the world.
Exactly. It's about making travel a right, not a privilege. But hey, despite all the challenges, I'm actually really optimistic about the future of travel.
Oh, yeah. Why is that?
I think e-visas have the potential to make travel so much better. Imagine applying for a visa is as easy as booking a flight online. You can track your application, know exactly what's happening, and travel without all that worry.
That does sound pretty ideal. No more frantic phone calls to embassies, mountains of paperwork.
Exactly. And with all that stress gone, you can focus on what really matters, experiencing the world and connecting with other cultures.
That's the dream, right? To explore the world without all the hassle.
It really is. And I think companies like 8Air, they're on the right track. They're using technology to make travel easier, but they haven't forgotten that human touch.
They're finding that sweet spot where technology and human connection come together.
Exactly. And that gives me a lot of hope for the future of travel.
Well, that's definitely reassuring to hear. It sounds like we're on the verge of some really exciting changes in the world of travel. Thanks for breaking it all down for us today.
My pleasure. It's been great.